and sticking around, because this is specifically for you. When we were brainstorming a few years ago of what we could do that would be helpful to our parents, our grandparents, our community members, one of the things that, the very first thing that came to mind was having Chad come and speak to us. We understand this world. If you have kids, you understand there's always new stuff online and new applications and new ways to get around filters and new ways to do everything. And so what Chad does is something called active digital parenting. And that's what we're going to be spending our time doing this week with him, the next 3 days. You'll have your time with him. I had Chad do this when I was at Concord Road for a family retreat, and I thought it was so beneficial, and I really wanted to have him come do the same thing here as well. And so he'll explain a lot. Once I hand it over to him in a minute, I'm going to take off and go do some videos. But I'm going to hand it over to him for the remainder of the time. But this is not going to be strictly lecture either. It'll be interactive. You can ask questions. I believe you have a question and answer at the end of every time as well. So if you have questions and you can't ask it in the moment, jot it down on a card in front of you and be sure to ask. And if you don't ask it today, if you have a question later, you can send it to me or write it down, and we'll give it to him tomorrow. He'll be with us all 3 nights, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night, kind of going over this as well. So just in case you don't know who Chad is, which some of you do, I found out earlier, Chad's a Huntsville native as well. And so it kind of helps. This is his old stomping grounds, but he's the education minister at the Gray Mirror Church of Christ up in Columbia, Tennessee now. Chad and his wife Bonnie have been married for 14 years. They have 3 boys, Jacob, David, and Micah. He also is a former active duty Marine from 2000 to 2004. He has a degree from Freed-Hardeman in ministry and in media arts as well. So he knows what he's talking about. He's lived out in the world. He knows what's going on. Chad, on his website, always talks about, he's got a blog that will just keep you up to date on what's going on with technology. You can follow there as well. That's all I'm going to give with you, Chad. And I'm going to say a prayer real quick before I hand it over to you. Let's pray. Father, we are so grateful for today, and we're grateful for our children and the young people who are here today and all those who put effort into making these days what they are, these evenings together what they are. We're thankful for Noah and each of the teachers. And Father, today I ask you to be with Chad, be with him these next 3 days as he talks about a subject that is so difficult and so ever-changing, really, in our lives. Father, help us to pay attention, to listen, to learn and grow, to ask good questions, to not be afraid to ask those questions sometimes that might need to be asked, because we know there's so many questions and these just with so many different things going on. Father, I'm grateful for all the parents and the grandparents who are here, the dedication they have to raising their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Father, it's just such a blessing to have them so dedicated and wanting to be here and wanting to learn. Continue to give those parents and grandparents the strength that they need, the energy that they need, the focus that they need, and the help that they need. And help us as a congregation to be all the help we can be for them as well. We're thankful for Chad and his work over the years in this area, that he provides such a service and a ministry in an area that we need so much. And Father, we're so thankful for your son. We're thankful for his life and his example that he set. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
So much for the invite to come here, and I really appreciate you being here. I really appreciate everything that this church I know stands for, and you guys have been a part of this community for a long time. I remember coming out here as a kid in the early 90s and late 90s and early 2000s before I went into the Marine Corps, and all sorts of different things coming out here for area wides and all sorts of different stuff. So I appreciate you, and I wanted to tell you really quickly, all of the materials, everything that you see, everything that I reference is going to be available at my website. And I don't make any kind of money off of this or anything. There's no ads on my site. So just go there to chadlayman.com/DPW. That stands for Digital Parenting Workshop. And you can find these slides. So if I go too fast or if you want to look back up something, there's also a resource guide there that you can download. And if you download it on your computer or iPad, there's going to be about 20 or 25 links that you can just click on and go to different websites of different resources and different things that I've kind of pulled together. And so that's kind of all new for this year. I've kind of revamped a bunch of stuff for 2021. I had a year off. I appreciate you hanging with me for a year and letting me come back even though y'all didn't get to have anything last year. I feel like everybody has that gap that 9 to 12 month gap in their calendars now where we're like, oh yeah, last year. When we talk about last year, what we really mean is 2019, don't we? And so, yeah, it's been an interesting year, and we depended on technology even more than you could possibly imagine last year, didn't we? When we went and got shut up in our homes for a couple of weeks and a couple of months for some parts of the world, when we went through all of that different stuff, technology became the thing that we turned to and used, and we communicated over Zoom and FaceTime, and we were using more of the internet and more of these devices than ever. I set up countless numbers of tiny, small computers for some of our older members at Graymere to watch the online videos and services that we put out. I became a video technician, a video guy overnight, and started producing videos for them in March. And so it's been a very interesting year, to say the least. But please, if you have any questions, get in touch with me. That's my Graymere email address as well. And if you have any questions throughout any of this first lesson tonight, first session tonight will be mainly lecture. But the next two, I really want to hear from you in a lot of discussion, and I will leave some time for questions afterwards as well. So let's kind of get to it. We're going to be talking about tonight, this first session, that purple dot up there, why we should be paying attention. Now, believe it or not, when I started this 7 years ago, you had to fight to get parents to just pay attention, to get parents to just understand that they needed to be paying attention. And now we don't have to fight that fight anymore. Now it's just the deluge of information, the deluge of new apps and new services and new things that you've got to make sure to keep in touch with and make sure that you're managing your kids' online digital development. It's very, very important that you know everything that's going on your child's device. We're going to talk about that, but again, I want to make sure that you understand this is the tip of the iceberg. You know how they say that the tip of the iceberg, the whole of the iceberg is 90% underwater? That's your job at home. It is going to be your job at home to go do the other 90% of the work, the other 90% of the research, the other 90% of everything else. We're just going to hit the little tip of the iceberg in all these sessions here this week. So we'll be talking about that tonight. Tomorrow we'll be talking about a little bit about what we're up against. And I don't want to necessarily call social media or the social networks our enemy as parents. That goes a little too far. But we need to teach our kids how to be responsible and use that technology in a positive way that glorifies God. And if we can teach them that, we will do our job as parents to digitally develop them as well. That third session, which will be Wednesday night, which I hope you'll stick around for, is really going to be, it's called my Rubber Meets the Road session. And it's where we're going to go through settings. We're going to talk about the differences between Google and Apple and Facebook and YouTube and settings for Netflix. And we're going to go through those different things. And it's going to be a little bit fairly technical, but at the same time, hopefully I can go slow enough so that all of us can get something out of it. And of course, you can download these slides and download my materials anytime you want. So if you want to get a head start on some of those things, be my guest. I would love to have your questions at any time during any of these sessions, including this evening. And so let's go ahead and get started. Remember back in 1996, how many of us are in the, let me ask this question because I'm going to be turning 40 years old this year. That terrifies me every time I say it. But I'm going to be turning 40 this year. And how many of you fall in the age range of anywhere from 35 to 55? Is that most of us? Okay. So that's most of us. And if you're outside that range or below that range, especially if you're below that range, this matters to you because you've probably got younger kids. But if you're above that range, you probably got grandkids. And you're going to have some grandkids. And you need to know this just as much as your children, as their parents need to know this. So if you think, well, you can't, I heard one guy one time last week, he said, I was at a digital parenting thing last week, and he said, well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I said, well, you can't, but at the same time, we've got to do our best to learn and educate ourselves on these things. So remember in 96, you don't get in strangers' cars, you don't meet people on the internet. In 2021, we literally summoned strangers to get into their cars. You think about that. Now, I know But in big cities like Nashville and different things like that, you literally use an app to summon a stranger to ride in their car and take you places. It's kind of interesting. And when we think about what that was 20 or 25 years ago, we never would have done that, right? The technology has changed so incredibly much. Times have changed. Temptations have not, though. The times and the technology have changed. It is harder for you to be a parent and a grandparent this day and age with this technology at children's fingertips than in any other time in human history. It's the same challenges, it's just a different delivery system. Your kids have different access to things. Remember what it was like to go set the VCR on Sunday evening? Because you came to church and you had to catch Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. She was on Sunday evenings, and you just had to make sure it was taped. And if you didn't catch it, then forget it. If your VCR didn't record it, forget it. You're not seeing it. You're just hearing about it, right? That's not the same with things these days. Kids have an unlimited amount of entertainment and information at their fingertips, and we can watch anything that we want. If I'd had Netflix as a 17-year-old, I would have gone hog wild. It would have been crazy. You think about the differences in technology that we have then versus now. Let's go back even further. A lot of people say, well, these people stare at all we do is I see just kids staring at their screens all the time. Blah, 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 and all kids do is stare at their screens. This is a photo from a 1928 train in New York City. Nobody's talking to one another. Nobody's listening to what everybody else is saying. They're all reading those newspapers. They got their heads buried in those newspapers, right? There's one major difference, though. When those people folded up that newspaper, what did they do? They talked about what they read. They talked about it with one another. They had civil discussions because they didn't have the technology that we have. They had civil discussions in person. As you have seen in the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, it's almost like we can't have civil discussions anymore, isn't it? It's almost like that every time somebody posts anything anywhere near a society issue online, that it gets blasted by somebody. Why can we not do that? We have only been dealing with this technology. If you think about it, this device has only been around for 13 years, 14 years. We've only had iPhones for 14 years. We've only had the major internet kinds of things, the modern internet that we've known, for about 15 or 16 years. YouTube is 16 years old. That's it. We're in the infancy of this, and we're still figuring it out. So we have got to, as this generation of parents and grandparents, we have got to figure out how we can be the best examples for our children and our grandchildren. This is a parenting issue first. It's a technology issue second. Before we start blaming the technology, before we say it's the screen's fault for being addictive, it's Facebook's fault for being too divisive, it's all this blah, 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 blah. Before we say that, we need to look at our parenting first. Now, this is not a parenting class, it's a digital parenting class. So I'm not going to go into the aspects of all parenting, but as a parent, I'm beginning to understand how difficult it is. I thought going in the Marine Corps, going to boot camp. I went in boot camp in 2000. I graduated in September of 2000, and I thought the rest of my life is downhill from here. Because there will never be anything else in my entire life that's more challenging than Marine Corps basic training. And I was wrong. Raising children is incredibly difficult. I'm going to tell you about one of my children tomorrow night. So a little bit of a preview there. This is a technology issue second, a parenting issue first. Now, the reason why I say it's a technology issue as well is because these technologies are designed, in some cases, to hook us. They're designed, in some cases, to be purposely addictive, especially to teenage brains. We're all addicted to this technology, whether we like it or not. But especially your young people, especially your 7, 10, 13, 12-year-old boys and girls are especially addicted to these things. And we have to have limits. I'm going to give you a couple of practical tips here at the end of this talk tonight on things that you can do to be a better digital parent, but also things that you can do to kind of limit that exposure a little bit. I like this quote from Albert Mohler. This is one of the aspects of the original presentation from 7 years ago. This quote has been in there ever since then. This was in 2014 when he said this. He said, "The digital age is upon us. In the span of less than 3 decades, we have redefined the way that humans communicate, entertain, inform, research, create, and that last one's very important, connect. And what we know now is only a hint of what is to come." I find that quote kind of terrifying and also very enlightening, very encouraging. Because what kind of technology comes next? How can they make these better? What can we do to make these things better and more ingrained into our lives? I don't know. All I know is how fast and how far we've come. In my lifetime, you're probably if you're in that age range of 35 to 55, you fall in that age range of you knew what it was like before these devices. You knew what it was like before you had the internet in your pocket. When the internet was a place that you had to go to, like the library. Y'all remember that? Remember when you had to use a payphone? Remember when you had to use America Online? All those different things. We'll talk about that here in just a second. If you would turn with me to Psalm 127:1. If you've got your Bibles, we're going to be reading this scripture. Psalm 127:1 simply says, and I've had this in my presentation from the beginning as well, simply says this: "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain." Now again, if we take that verse out of context just a little bit and we think about that phrase, "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain." My dad has been a carpenter for 40 plus years. Carpenter and contractor, 40 plus years, northwest Huntsville, Alabama. He's retired now, but the man can do anything with a piece of wood that you want. And it's amazing to see him work. I don't know, I didn't get those genes. I got the techie electronic genes is what I got because I'm a tech nerd. And I tried to put a shelf together, one of those little dinky shelves from Walmart or whatever one time. I tried to put it together and it wasn't straight when I got done with it. It was kind of leaning. And I'm sitting here going, it's not the way that looks on the box. That's not the way that should look. And I wasted 45 minutes, an hour, putting that shelf together. And I think in an incredibly simple sense, that may be part of what this verse is saying. That if we build our homes, if we raise our kids, and we forget that God is there, if we don't let God build our homes, what are we doing? If we don't inject God and make Him the centerpiece of everything that we do in our families and in our homes, what are we doing? And in this day and age, if we forget about the digital part of parenting, what are we doing? If we think that somebody else is going to handle it, and again, I'm going to say a couple of things that are pretty hard to hear. But if we think that a youth minister, or if we think that some school teachers are going to handle digital parenting for us, we're wrong. It is our job as parents to do that work. It is our job as grandparents when those grandchildren are at our homes to take care and make sure that they are safe and secure and then you know what they're doing on those devices. Even if you have no idea what to do and how to manage the devices, it's time to educate ourselves. And it's time to kind of empower ourselves as well. Everybody has a life online. Your children have lives online. So the question that you have to answer is do you know what they're doing? Do you know everything that's going on the device that you have in their hands? Do you know everything that's going on the social networks that you allow them to visit, or the apps that you allow them to have on their device? Do you know everything that's going on? You should. That's exactly what we're going to talk about. We're first going to identify the problems and the things that we're going to have issues with and the things that you have issues with, and I do want to hear from you. But in that third session on Wednesday night is really a way to lock down devices, to secure devices, a way to tell the difference in what is what on some of these devices as well. Okay? All of these sessions really build upon and connect to one another. Now, our kids are connected like never before. They are on their devices all the time, like never before. We are too. We're constantly connected with work, with emails, with phone calls and messages and all sorts of different things. We're just as connected as they are. But when we think about how to combat these different things, it can seem overwhelming. And I want to assure you that there has never been an easier time to manage technology than right now. There really hasn't. When you talk about computers that I used and we all probably used in the 1990s, could you imagine trying to manage one of those things for your kids? Maybe it would have been easier because they don't have to carry them around with them at all times. They're not constantly connected, right? Maybe that would have been easier. But at the same time, you got to think about it was so much more complex back then. And now there are apps and services out there that will help you absolutely dominate and make sure that this phone is secure. Make sure whatever device your child uses is secure. Remember these relics? I talked about them a few minutes ago. Remember the last time you used a payphone? Can anybody remember that? Can anybody remember you remember that? The last time that anybody used America Online? Remember, that was the internet for a lot of people. It was for me. I found out just recently that wasn't the internet. That was just a little gateway to the internet that America Online gave you. It's crazy to think about. And when we think about these different things, it's very interesting to note, we're going to go past the cat thing because we don't have time, that there's a few things that parents as we need to realize, and I've got a couple of things here. One is that we can never use the excuse that we did not know. That we did not know. My first year in ministry was about 14 years ago. And I don't know if I fell asleep in the class at Freed-Hardman. I don't know if I wasn't attentive that day. There's probably a combination of a lot of different things. But I missed the class on ministers and taxes. Now, if you know anything about ministers and taxes, if you're a CPA or if you've been a minister at all, you know exactly that it is just a complete, absolute, it's a mess. And when you think about all that stuff, I didn't know any of that. And I thought, well, I'm just going to file my taxes like normal. And my accountant, he comes up and he says, so you've got $4,600 to pay the IRS, right? I said, excuse me? He says, yeah, you owe $4,600 in tax. And I said, how can I do? I didn't make any money. How can I do that? I don't have any money. I'm a newlywed. I've been married for 8 months. What am I doing? I had no idea. Now, how sympathetic do you think the IRS was? They weren't. Spoiler alert, okay? They said, we'll be happy to work out a payment plan with you, Mr. Landman. We appreciate your call, right? Just because I didn't know was not an excuse. The information about minister taxes was freely available. All I had to do was talk to my accountant. That's why I pay a guy $300, $400, $500 every single year to do it for me now. Because he knows exactly what he's doing. He specializes in that. But we as parents can never use the excuse that we didn't know when it comes to technology. When it comes to apps and services and things on your child's device, or on your home computer or laptop or whatever that might be, we can't use that excuse. We can't go and say, well, I didn't know that app could do that. Well, I didn't know the pictures disappeared after a certain amount of time. Well, I didn't know that she was going to do this, or I didn't know that he was going to get in this kind of trouble. And that's your job to know. If you allow your children to be on these devices, if you allow them to use those services, you better know the ins and outs of every single one of them. And I know exactly what you're saying. That sounds like a big job. It is. It's hard keeping up with my 9-year-old. I don't even want to think about 4 or 5 years in the future. It's amazing the amount of requests and stuff that comes from my little boys. When you think about that as well, the second thing I think we need to realize is that your child does not yet have the experience and willpower to keep themselves in check. Now, I say that, and I worded that specifically for a purpose, is that we know adults that don't have the experience and willpower to keep themselves in check on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and we see all sorts of adults saying things. So why would we hope a 10-year-old boy would know the difference, would know exactly what to do online unless he's been taught? When we think about that, I think that sometimes we as parents have this problem. We say to ourselves, I know that I've taught them better. I know that they have grown up in my house, and I know that they know what to do is right. And I think sometimes we use that as an excuse to not do what we should do. I think sometimes, and again, this is dramatic to say, but I think sometimes that's the devil speaking to us. Is exactly what he wants. He does not want us to do everything that we need to do on these devices to protect our children. He wants our children to be exposed. He wants them to see the things that they shouldn't see. He wants them to prematurely look at things that they shouldn't look at on the internet and have discussions with people that you don't know. That's what he wants. Because he wants to destroy this world and he wants to destroy your children. So what we have to do is we have to do everything in our power and our know-how to keep him at bay. You know, when we talk about kids having driver's licenses, why do we not trust our children who are... Why would we not trust a 10-year-old boy to have a driver's license? Well, because that's crazy, okay? If you've ever had a boy or you've ever had a 10-year-old boy, you completely understand why that's not true. Even a 12 or 14-year-old boy, right? But when you think about that, why do we give out driver's licenses? It's because at 16 years old, we as a society have decided what? That person is old enough, if they pass a test and they do all the things that they need to do in accordance with the law, and they get their driver's license after a certain amount of time. That's what we've decided. And so why, though, are we giving our children who have devices that can access the wealth of all human knowledge, unprotected, unlocked, unwatched iPhones and iPads? Why are we doing that? Why are we not spending hours with a device before it goes into our children's hands? Why are we not taking that device and making regular checks every single week? Yeah, I know, it gets completely bananas and crazy and all the stuff that you've got to keep up with. But you've got to work out a system with you and your spouse to work on that and to get that strategy, to have that strategy ready to go. You know, we used to, when we talk about holding our kids' hands, I've got a little boy right now. His name is David. He's 7 years old. He looks exactly like me, and he's literally a carbon copy of me, y'all. And he does exactly the opposite of what I tell him to do. He will be running down this aisle, and I'll say, "Come here," using my best dad voice, not as good as the mom voice, but it's still okay. I use my dad voice, "Come here right now." And he'll smile at me and turn around and run the opposite direction. Because he's a 7-year-old boy, right? And that's what he does. Now, he's going to pay for that later, but that's what he does. Now, why would I take my little David, and this is what is this, 53 out here? 431? Okay, 431. I didn't come out to Owens Crossroads when I was a kid very much, but I do know that it's 53 or 41 or one of them. But anyway, why would we, if there was a playground right next to the road out here, and there was no fences around that playground, and I took David out there and I said, "David, you just go out there, you have fun, and I'll sit out here in the building, right next to the building, and you just go out there, you have fun, and not watch what he's doing, get on my phone, and just hope that he didn't get hurt." We would never do that with any of our children, would we not? That's crazy. Why are we doing it with these devices? What's on these things is far more dangerous than playing next to a busy highway. What they can see on these things, and if they're not locked down, is far more dangerous to their souls and their minds than playing on a playground next to cars going right past them. We have to see the danger in these things. We have to see the potential, sure. We have to see the way that these tools can be used in positive ways, sure. But for our children, we have to make sure that we are protecting them, because as parents, our first job is to protect them. It's not to be their friend. It's not to be with them. It's not to do anything that would make them happy. It is to protect them. And as a parent, I need to hear that sometimes too. That the tough part of being a parent is saying no, is telling them, "You can't have this, you can't do this, you can't go there. No. No is a powerful thing as a parent. So we need to understand that. We have to hold our kids' hands just like I would hold David's hand going across this parking lot with white knuckles. because he's going to take off, and sometimes people aren't watching, and they're going to come right around these corners right here. We need to hold our kids' hands a bit, just like we tell them don't touch the stove or don't put this in the electrical socket or things like that. We need to do the same thing as a digital parent and hold their hands and guide them to being a responsible digital citizen. Because guess what? Here's the thing. And David Shannon put it this way. David Shannon's now the president at Freed-Hardeman, which again still blows my mind to say that. But back when he was a lowly preacher, he used to talk about parenting with the end in mind. Now, what is the end? When does the end of your parenting journey, when does that happen? Well, it doesn't really ever happen. My mom is still my mom. You know what my mom was doing at about 5:30 this afternoon? Are you at Owens Crossroads yet? Are you fine? Are you okay? That's exactly what she was doing, because she's my mom and I'm a 40-year-old man and she is still checking up on me, which is completely fine. She's still my mom. And you will still be your children's parents. But here's the thing. You stop being their full-time parent maybe when they go off to school. When they hit 18, 19, 20 years old, your influence greatly diminishes. You're not waking them up every morning anymore. You're not getting them to school. You're not taking them to appointments. You're not doing different things like that. They are off. And your influence, your day-to-day influence, most of the time has ended. That's the end. So you have until, and don't go to this website, I don't know what the name of it is, but there's a website you can go to and plug in your child's age, and it will tell you exactly how many days, hours, minutes, and seconds you have left until they turn 18. And it's like, nope, I'm not doing that. Not at all. Now you think about your kid being an older teenager. And you may think, I've not done any of this stuff. I've not done any parental digital parenting. I've not done any of this kind of stuff. My kid is 15, 16, 17 years old. It's too late. It's never too late. Well, my kid is only 4, 5, 6 years old. It's too early. It's never too early. These kids are practically born with screens in their hands. And so we need to make sure that we are managing those things. It's a new frontier that we've only been dealing with for a decade and a half. We have to hold their hands. I got a couple of crazy statistics for you, and I don't tell you these to be dramatic or to scare you, but at some point it should kind of wake you up. So if you kind of do and run by the numbers, as of February of this year, there were 1.8 trillion websites on the internet. That's not individual pages. There's trillions and trillions of pages. This is 1.8 billion, I think I said trillion before. 1.8 billion websites. There's probably close to 2 billion now, but 68,140,166 of those in February were dedicated to pornography. Now, when we think about our kids not seeing something that they should see, that's where our mind goes first, right? So we're going to pick on pornography for just a few minutes. And you say, well, man, 2 billion and 68 million, that's pretty good. That's pretty good odds, right? You may have even heard some wrong statistics that say that 60% of the internet is pornography. That's not correct. The internet is enormous. That's about 0.04% right there. So if you do the math and everything like here, this would look okay, right? Well, the odds are kind of in our favor until you look at stats like this. 1 in 5, 20% of searches made on a mobile device, an iPhone, an iPad, an Android phone, are for pornography. That makes you think. 1 in 5 searches. There's a couple of really smart people that said some really smart quotes that I'd like to share with you. Adolescents who view pornography feel shame, diminished self-confidence, and sexual uncertainty. We do not need our kids as sexually as uncertain as this world is. We don't need our kids feeling even more sexually uncertain, do we? We don't at all. Excuse me. Porn use by our youth is a greater threat to our national well-being than our economy. If you get connected with porn early in life, it alters your ability to relate. A significant relationship exists between frequent pornography use and feelings of loneliness, including major depression in adolescents. Adolescents, 13 to 18 years old, dealing with major depression. And I'm not just talking about your young men, your young boys. This is beginning to affect young women more and more as these devices have given us more access and more availability. Did you know that this kind of stuff is 2 taps away on Twitter? It's 2 taps. It's even less if you're using an unsecured browser, or if you're on if you're on Safari or Google Chrome on your phone. It's even less if you know the internet password. You can go to the little private mode and go right to it. That's why when we talk about the solutions and things that we're going to have on Wednesday night, that really your internet at home should be secured. It should be secured on your child's phone wherever they go. I'm going to teach you how to do that if you want to know. Major depression, that just makes me sad. Parents are the weak link in the chain when it comes to protecting their children. You think about a weak link, you're pulling a bush or a stump or something out of the ground or whatever, and you wrap that chain around it and all this other stuff, you get that truck. If there is a broken link in that chain, where's that chain going to break? Right there. It's not a hard concept. Sometimes we as parents are that weak link. Sometimes we're the ones that are causing these things to not get done, not securing and having our children do the things and see the things that they shouldn't. I believe, and I know that all of your children and grandchildren are good kids. I think that most kids are not up to no good and not trying to be nefarious and not trying to do the wrong things and not trying to look at the wrong things. But they have to know that their protectors are in their corner. They have to know that you are there and that you will stand with them, but at the same time, they have to know that it's coming down if they do something too. If you go to my website that I showed you before, chadlamon.com/DPW, there's a list. It's like I can't remember exactly what I called it, but it's one of those links before you get to the presentations. And there was a woman who drafted up an 18-point kind of parent device contract. And her boy, who was 12 or I think he was 13 years old, was getting an iPhone for the first time. She spent hours with the phone before. She did all the parental controls. She followed all the things on YouTube, and whatever she could find, she secured it as best as she could. She handed that phone over to him, and she handed him the contract. And she said, "You're going to sign this. You're going to read everything on this. You're going to sign it, and we're going to abide by it." Your kids need to know. They need to be aware of those rules. I have a few parents at Graymere that have some of those rules posted on their fridge with the child's signature on it, under it. So they can just go, you agreed to this. You point out some things. Oh, by the way, you agreed to this back 6 or 8 months ago. We need to hold our kids accountable as well. And they need to know that they're being watched. You don't need to be secretive about protecting your children. You do not need to go behind their back and do anything like that, because studies have shown that children who know that they're being watched are far less likely, something like 80% less likely to seek out trouble with their friends, to download the wrong things or go to the wrong places on the web or on their devices. If they know they're being watched. I heard it. I was on a mission trip one time. There were 2 kids in the corner playing on their phones, and I heard one of them say, "I can't download that. My dad watches my phone." You need to be that parent. You need to be that dad. The average age of first exposure to internet pornography or nudity on a screen is 8 years old. Now, you think that's young, and it is. It's actually trending downward to about 7.5 years old now. Why do you think that is? Access. They've got it in their pockets. Parents are giving phones to children earlier and earlier and earlier. Let me tell you, parents, there's a lot of options out there for these little walkie-talkie type phones. If you really need to be in communication and in touch with your children while they're at soccer practice or they're doing these things, don't buy them an iPhone when they're 8 years old. There are plenty of options out there for them to use. You just have to do the research. 8 years old, 6 years ago, this average was 11 years old. It's dropping dramatically, and it's getting younger and younger every single year. 94% of children have seen nudity on their screens, most while doing homework. Why is that? Well, maybe you're working. And when do you tell your children that you want their homework to be done? Before you get home, right? And when they get home, and increasingly kids are doing homework on their Chromebooks or on their iPads or on the home computer, and they're kids, and they get distracted. And they may look at something that they shouldn't look at. That's when this happens. 87% of children have had sexual solicitations made to youth in chat apps, Snapchat, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger. If you think Facebook Messenger is safe, it's really not. There's plenty of spam. There's plenty of nefarious individuals everywhere. In fact, we don't have to worry about guys at the parks lurking in the bushes anymore. What we have to worry about is the people on TikTok and Snapchat and WhatsApp and all these other different ones that are targeting your young women and your young boys. Law enforcement is really having a hard time with some of this stuff, especially in the state of Texas, where they've enacted all sorts of new laws and new things that they're cracking down on people, specifically 40, 50, 60-year-old men trying to get young ladies to do things that are completely inappropriate. It's pretty terrible. And again, you need to be aware of that, and you need to be checking your child's phone periodically. 7 out of 10, 67%, admit to clearing their browser history, search history, YouTube watch history, whatever you want to fill in that blank in order to hide internet usage from you. And again, most of it's not nefarious. No, most of it's not really bad. They just want to have a private life. And what you've got to do as a parent is have a plan to grow with them. They don't rate, when they're 17 years old, my boys don't get any privacy. They hardly get privacy in the bathtub, okay? Or going to the bathroom, much less anything else. They're not going to get privacy, but as they get older, my wife and I have tried to institute a plan, or what we think is going to be a plan, of a graduated giving them more and more freedom as when they get to that point when they're 18 and they take off. We have to prepare them for the real world at the same time keeping them protected. That's a balance, a delicate balance that you're going to have to strike. Privacy is an illusion. I'm going to hit on this a whole lot more tomorrow night, so I'm not going to say a whole lot about it. But I like to throw in Hebrews 4:13 about God knows every single thing and every creature on earth, and He knows what we're going to do. And if God knows that, how are you going to hide anything that we do on these devices? If God knows all and He is all and He's in us all and He's through us all, how do we expect to hide anything from Him, including what we do on these devices? It's a very important point to make. I do want to get to our last points. We're going to have kids coming back in here in just a few minutes. I do want to say, and I've said a lot of terrible stuff tonight, and don't think this whole thing is going to be doom and gloom. It's not. We're going to talk a little bit tomorrow about the social dilemma. If you get an opportunity, I know I'm giving you 24 hours notice, but if you get an opportunity to watch that on Netflix, please go do it. It's called The Social Dilemma. It's how do we use this amazing technology for our kids to use it responsibly, but how do we balance that with the fact of our privacy is going out the window? Our information is being used against us for different things. How do we do that? So that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow evening. Here's some things that you can do at home tonight. And again, you can take a picture of the screen. It's got it on my website. You can download the slides, whatever you'd like to do. But I'd like to do this very lastly here tonight. These are things that you can do at home when you get home tonight. Make a list of devices in your home that access the internet. Now, I know that sounds incredibly simple, but I do that every 6 months. I have a calendar thing that pops up, and then I'm supposed to do an internet audit of my home every 6 months. And I take a legal pad, a good old school legal pad, I put a line down the middle, and I list every device in our home that accesses the internet. And every single time, I find something that I've forgotten about. Me. And so make that list, and then on that right-hand column, put what kind of parental controls do you have set. We have passwords for our passwords at our house. It is annoying. It is awful. It is when I want to watch something on Netflix after my boys have gone to bed, I've got to type in 3 passwords just to get to something that I want to see, right? Yeah, it's not optimal. But at the same time, if it keeps my boys from seeing something that they shouldn't, it's worth it. Make a list of devices in your home that access the internet. That's the first way to just audit what you have. If you need to get rid of devices, do it. If you need to sell some, do it. If you need to upgrade some, do that. It never hurts to have up-to-date devices, because up-to-date devices give you up-to-date parental controls as well. So it's not a good idea to give your son or daughter a 7-year-old iPad that can't run the newest operating system, because it does not have those nice parental controls that they keep adding every single year. This one is nearly impossible. The next one, have the child's device always managed / in your sight. I should have put in your home, at least try to do that. You know, one of the things that my mom never let me have was a television in my bedroom. I wanted a TV in my bedroom to where I could watch all 3 channels that we had. What was it, 48, 31, and 19. Man, I still remember my childhood television channels. And she wouldn't let me have it. I said, I don't want to play video games or nothing. She's like, you're not going to have it. And the same kind of thing goes with these devices. That's going to be a major battle that kind of connects with the next one, take up all devices at bedtime. Do not let your children have it overnight. I have had too many parents call me and say, a person showed up at my door at 3 in the morning. Their son had been texting their daughter, and she sent inappropriate photos, all sorts of different crazy stuff. Kids should not have access to this kind of stuff overnight. The next one, that 4th one, look for previous evidence, is a little unpleasant. And I put that in there because some of you have had issues and trouble. Some of you have had to deal with things like this already. And if you have, then it's probably you need to look for that previous evidence of things that have happened, okay? Beware of suspicious apps. You should be taking and have physical access to your child's device on an irregular basis at least once a week. And you should look at their phone and slide through their phone. Don't act like you're going to try to catch them red-handed with anything. Just frame it as, I need to look at your phone because I'm your parent and I'm your protector. And when you look at that phone, you should be questioning everything that you see that you don't know about. And if you enact some of the parental controls that we're going to talk about tomorrow night and Wednesday night, you shouldn't have this problem. But if you do, if you see apps that you don't know what they are, you're not a math whiz, why do you have 5 calculator apps? That's kind of weird. You need to start asking hard questions if you don't know what apps are on their device, okay? Case in point, there was a calculator app, reason why I say that was masked as a secret photo vault. You could set a PIN number and hit the decimal point, and it would flip over and have a photo vault that was not connected to your iCloud, not connected to your camera roll or anything like that. And you could keep all these photos on there, and it just looked like a calculator app to anybody else. And an entire Colorado high school football team was expelled because of it back in 2016 or 17. That's crazy. They had all sorts of inappropriate pictures of each other, of different other things that were going on. It was not pretty. So again, you need to know what those apps are on your child's phone. Live life, and this is a very important one that we can't really get into deeply, but live life on your devices no differently than real life. We have this disconnect that what we type on Facebook with our little tiny keyboard and our thumbs just doesn't apply to real life. And we can say anything that we want to. Guess what? Your kids are watching that. Your kids are watching everything that you say on Facebook. Your kids are watching everything that you say on these different kinds of apps and services. And we need to live our lives on these phones and in this technology just as we would on Sunday morning here at the church. We need to make sure that that is happening. The last one, and I said this before, develop a plan with your spouse to grow together with your children to help them make good digital decisions. That is all I have. We don't have a lot of time for questions, but we do have a few minutes for questions. What are some thoughts and things that you have from anything that maybe I've said or some things that you have heard in other presentations or seen elsewhere? What questions or concerns do you have? I'm all ears. We'll have a lot more time for questions in the next few days, but go ahead. Anybody? Anything I say catch you off guard tonight? Okay, the calculator part. There's all sorts of stuff like that. Before Apple caught it, there had been like 300,000 people download that app. And, you know, there's millions and millions of apps on there. And Apple is just one company with a team of people that manage that kind of stuff. There's real people, not necessarily algorithms. There's real people managing these things sometimes. And stuff is gonna slip through the cracks. And so don't think that just because you've got an iPhone makes it better than having a Google phone or having something else. That's a good observation. Anybody else? Yes, sir. I'm going to talk about those mainly on Wednesday night, but I will give you a preview. The one that I like for older teens is called Life 360. Life 360. I'm sure you've probably heard of that one. It's really good for drivers and teens, and paired with the app that's called OurPact, OURPACT. I really like that combination. And both of those apps are available on Android and on iPhone. They've had some, and I'll be honest, they've had some difficulties on the iPhone. The iPhone has been, up until about the last 3 to 4 years, been really hard to write a good parental control app for. And so they've had some success in dealing with Apple and different things, and they've come a little bit farther than anybody, I think. And so that's the two main apps. I used to have this big laundry list of apps that did it, but I really just kind of zeroed in on those. The other one, yes, ma'am. It's OurPact, OURPACT, and you can go to OURPACT.com and check that out. It's basically an app you can download, and now these are paid services. And so if you like it, you can use the trial mode, but if you like it, you can pay them a couple of bucks a month. Again, pay these people a couple of bucks a month. I know we get nickel and dimed with cable bills and Netflix and Disney and all this other stuff. I know we get nickel and dime to death on that stuff. But again, this is your child's security we're talking about, not just some video streaming, okay? So that's OurPact, and then the one for older drivers was Life 360. Life 360 is like LoJack for your kids. It's amazing. And it tells them plus or minus 2 or 3 miles an hour how fast they're going in their cars. I mean, it's amazing. And you can do all sorts of stuff with Life 360, especially if you have a young driver. Okay? But yeah, and another one I've come to like a lot is Bark. It's a little bit more complex, B-A-R-K. And it's a little bit more complex to set up, but I've heard that it is just amazing what you can do with it. You like Bark? You going to tell me about Bark on Wednesday night? Okay, all right. Was there another 5 minutes? Okay, great. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Can I reassure you? My wife and I always told, and the question was for the live stream, I'm going to repeat it, is that her daughter is on a softball team, and the coach encourages them to share things on their social feeds and Instagram and Facebook and things like that. What if she doesn't have those things? You know, you lied if you signed your kids up for Instagram or Facebook before they were 13 years old. Did you know that? You lied if you did that, because you had to say, I agree to this big, long, what's called an end-user license agreement. It's all that lawyer gobbledygook and it says plainly, 13 years of age or older. Now, do they check? No, obviously they don't, because there's tons of kids that are 13 and under that are on those social networks. But if you set up that for them, or if they did it themselves, they lied. So you are not, and I will tell you right now, you may feel like you're in the minority, but you're not. And you are doing a good job. And you need to stand your ground on that. How old is your daughter? You need to stand your ground on that at least for a little bit more, a little bit longer. You need to start, and again, with your spouse or whoever it is that you are helping raise them, you need to develop that plan with them to say, we're going to graduate up. You're going to have this 1 or 2 social networks when you're 13 or 14. You're going to have this more access to YouTube and all these other different things when you're 15 and 16 and all this other different stuff. You are not alone, and you should not apologize. You are in no position to have to apologize to anybody for what you know that your child can handle. I want you to make sure that you understand that your children, you know your children and grandchildren better than anybody else does. Don't you ever let anybody tell you how to parent. And don't ever let anybody try to coerce you into doing something like that if you don't feel it's necessary for your children. I want to give you a round of applause. You know what I mean? Yes? We don't have it written out, no. He asked for the live stream, he asked if we had, my spouse and I have our plan. We have to deal with so much so our kids one of them has a little Nintendo. Our oldest has a Nintendo and his own iPad. It's not his, obviously, but it's an iPad he uses. And we have had multiple discussions about at what age do we graduate to these. And we're going to basically try to have the same plan for our 2 younger boys. And so while I don't have anything written out, that's a very good suggestion to probably write out some type of kind of rough plan for that. And again, that kind of stuff changes all the time, and you know your children better than anybody. But you should have some benchmarks. You should have some points where you trust your children enough to be able to do these certain things. You know, it's kind of the same thing. My mom, there was a girl I had a crush on when I was 16 or 17 that lived in Decatur, Alabama. And I wanted to go to Decatur so bad, and my mom would not let me go to Decatur. It was 45 minutes away, and I was 16. And I was so mad at her. She wouldn't let me go to Decatur. Mom, there's nothing in Decatur but a river. Don't worry about it, right? And she wouldn't let me go because I had not graduated to that point where she was going to let me go off and do that. And it's the same kind of thing. You got to let your children wade in the creek of their ankles in the water, so to speak, for a while. You got to graduate them up to being waist level in the swimming pool and then jumping off the high dive. You got to do that same gradual thing with digital parenting. That's an excellent observation there, Nathan. Any other questions? I think we are out of time because Noah's back there and he's looking at me ominously. So we will end that tonight. If you think of questions for tomorrow night, please don't keep them to yourself. You can email me and I will answer them anonymously. Or if you want to get in touch with me and actually keep them for tomorrow night, we're going to be talking about social media tomorrow night and then device control on Wednesday night. So thank you very, very much for your attention. I really appreciate it. And we will adjourn for the time and prepare for the onslaught of more kids. So thank y'all very much.